You got buyers who are more skeptical, more pure driven, harder to reach than ever before, have a million solutions out there. You have sellers who are, in general, less tenure, less experience, trying to sell to these older, more experienced buyers. That is the recipe for the modern sales environment that we find ourselves in.
Welcome to the Modern Selling Podcast, where we help the entire sales community to create more sales conversations with today's modern buyer. This includes anyone from entrepreneurs and business owners to sales reps and sales leaders. Each episode, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you find, engage, connect, and nurture your relationships with your buyers. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., your host, and you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. All righty, we're here today on the Modern Selling Podcast. This episode, I've got an awesome guest. We're going to be getting into some science. We're going to be getting into the mind of what's happening and what salespeople should be doing. And I'm super excited. Let me introduce to you guys that are listening in right now, Mr. David Priemer. And he is also specifically just launched the book, Sell the Way You Buy. In fact, sellthewayyoubuy.com. He's also the founder and chief sales scientist for Cerebral Selling. David, welcome to the show, my man.
Oh, thanks a lot, Mario. You know what I think? I need to record that. We're going to record it, and that's going to be like my voicemail outgoing, that was an awesome introduction. Thanks so much.
You could play that as the voice of God. Ladies and gentlemen, please
right.
Welcome to the stage, Mr. David Priemer.
I'm going to snip that. It's going to be the intro from now on.
There you go. Snip it, baby. Snip it. Go ahead and handle it. Listen, man, I'm excited to be able to spend some time chatting with you. We've got some really great topics of conversation for today's podcast, thinking about how people buy, how people sell, selling values, experiencing the product, all those types of things that a lot of sellers are constantly going through and utilizing. So, but we've got some great topics. But before we get into that, I got a question for you. And I'm looking for truth. You promise you give me truth here?
Absolutely.
All right. I want truth and I want juicy. I'm looking for something juicy. I'm looking for the next best comment or statement of what's happening. So here we go. Tell us something nobody knows about you, even if they were to look at your social profiles.
So I'll give you two for number one. I have a black belt in karate, and I'm a certified meteorologist.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Wait. Now that one, that's curiosity. Hold on. How do you become a certified meteorologist? And you've got all this sales experience from, Salesforce as a VP of commercial sales to Influitive, teaching sales leadership, now having your own business. Wait, where did this certified meteorologist come in from?
No kidding, right? Well, let all the jokes about forecast accuracy start to fly now. That's typically what people say when they.
That's a good one.
When they learn that. They're like, what's the weather going to be like? My family still teases me. But no, you know what? Here's the thing, right? Everyone ends up in sales by accident. No one gets into sales on purpose. We don't teach it in school. It's not like little kids growing up say, you know what I want to be, right? And so we all get into it by accident. The fact that I started my career as a research scientist and then ended up getting into sales at the turn of the dot-com boom. That was my entry point. But, so maybe I have a more unique, entry point than other people. But no, I started my career as a research scientist. And in my undergrad days, I did my undergraduate degree in chemistry and atmospheric science. And so as part of that, they were like, oh, you could become a certified meteorologist. You just need to take these couple extra courses in addition to whatever you were doing. So I'm like, sure, why not? Like throw it on the pile. And so it was actually me and another guy in our particular program. And we both got our certificates in meteorology. And he ended up being the chief meteorologist of the Weather Network here in Canada. So we still keep in touch now. I never was on a green screen. I never, pointed to the clouds or the cold front moving in. But that's how it happened.
Well, you can take that skill and you can apply it to selling when doing things like selling with video, where you can, have your backgrounds like this, and you can be that meteorologist. Right. Those of you listening and you can't see, David's looking straight at me, and I've got my virtual background, and you can see my hands are disappearing into the act. But you got the green screen right here. You can talk to it. You can get your points up. That actually would be kind of cool. You got to produce your next video on that one.
Well, I'll tell you, like about a year or two ago, so my friend who's at the Weather Network, he said, let's get together, let's have lunch. And we've known each other for 20 some odd years. And I've never actually kind of been on camera. So he let me go into like where they do like the green screen and all the broadcasts. And he let me do like a little mock weather forecast. So I got to, live vicariously for a moment as a weather forecaster, but no, lots of fun.
All right. That's a good one. I like that. And the black belt in karate. That's pretty cool too. All right. Very good. Unfortunately, you probably aren't able to spar or practice right now, given the shelter in place requirements or people, being concerned about being in an open environment. So hopefully you're practicing at home on the bag.
I hung up the belt a long time ago. I earned the black belt. I think I was between the ages of like 15 and 23 was kind of when I was a practitioner. And then I grew up and had kids. I was actually a hockey player for about 40 years. I played hockey.
So it's funny you said that, because I thought anybody that's what you're going to say. I don't know why I thought, I was like, he's going to say hockey. He's going to say hockey.
Well, that's a given. That's an intuitive thing. I'm a Canadian boy and like everyone plays hockey, but no, hockey was a lot easier to fit into the schedule than karate. And especially, I mean, now we both have kids. Now it's like all the things I need to do athletically, I need to fit in before like 6:30 in the morning, because after that the kid crap takes over and I'm running around on the weekends.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff, so. I'm with you on that one. Well, this is great. I mean, like one of the things I loved about your background, especially as we started, vetting out, who should we have on the podcast? You're tried and true, right? Yes, you started as a research scientist, which is interesting that that's where your career started. But you've been in many different leadership positions, from director of sales engineering and solutions consulting, sales operations. And a big portion of your time was spent as a VP of sales for multiple companies, Salesforce.com, over the commercial sales organization, Influitive. And now you went out on your own was it 3 years ago?
Yeah, that's right.
About 3 years ago, as founder and chief sales scientist of Cerebral Selling. And you just published the book, which I love the title, Sell the Way You Buy. My gosh, it is something that I've been saying for such a long time. Like, is that the way? If you received that message, would you open it? Would you take action on it? But like, hold on a second, like put yourself in the buyer's shoes. So it's so apropos for the time that we're living in. But let's talk a little bit about fundamentally, why do you think selling is so different? Well, and I would agree, I'm with you, more difficult than it was 10 years ago versus now.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of factors. I'd say there's things on the selling side and then on the buyer side, right? So on the buyer side, think about this, with the advent of the internet and now the kind of the low bar for people just to create solutions of all kinds, right? You look at B2B technology, completely saturated, very low bar. Customers have infinite choice. And, the examples I often give in the marketing technology space alone, 2011, people have seen this before, the marketing architecture diagram, 150 vendors in the marketing technology space. 2020, April 2020, this new survey comes out, over 8,000 vendors. So there's just so much choice, so much information, and it's actually become very difficult for buyers to now, make these purchasing decisions online because of all this information. The purchase ease is reduced, the regret is at an all-time high, but also, so that's kind of on the buyer side. On the seller side, and so I'd say, let's go back to the buyer side for a second, because of all of this, the attention of a buyer is so razor thin, right? We just sound for most buyers the same as everyone else. There's a million solutions out there. So as a protection mechanism, buyers have learned to protect their kind of attention and mental bandwidth more so than ever. And then, of course, on the selling side, you have the fact that, buyers are getting harder to connect with. It's taking, double the outreach attempts that it used to take, 10 years ago. And, as a seller, most sellers, the average age or the average tenure of a seller is decreasing, right? You're getting, you're trying to go out there, you're trying to hire, you're actually getting, less experience for more money. So you kind of shove all these things together in a blender, and you got buyers who are more skeptical, more peer driven, harder to reach than ever before, have a million solutions out there. You have sellers who are, in general, less tenure, less experience, trying to sell to these older, more experienced buyers. That is the recipe for the modern sales environment that we find ourselves in. And if I can add one more thing, buyers are getting much less tolerant of shitty sales tactics, right? Because they have all of these choices, there's kind of a process of natural selection. I'm Canadian, so I say process. There's a process of natural selection out there where buyers are just saying, you know what, I don't want to be treated like this anymore. There's like a million choices and I'm just going to move on. So all of that is kind of the state of modern selling.
Yeah. I mean, you raised a good point about the tools and technologies that are out there. And, just looking at if you're selling to the sales line of business, the sales line of business buyer. I think it was last year, Nancy Nardin published with Smart Selling Tools, the new number of over 700 technology application providers just in the sales world alone. So, I think you gave the number, what was it, 8,000 you said?
That was in the marketing technology space.
For MarTech,
8,000 vendors. Yeah.
And it used to be just a few years ago was 5,000. And before that was, into the hundreds. And so, it's like, so there's so much that's out there. If I were to pick a market to go and develop an application for, it would be the sales line of business. It would be the sales line of business. Nonetheless, to your point, we have the ability to do such rapid deployment and or development of technology that has created, a lot of information and a lot of sales organizations trying to reach out to one single buyer, and it creates a lot of problems for sure, no doubt. So talk a little bit about some of the science though, which is what I really love about your background, especially being a research scientist. What can science tell us about how people actually make buying decisions?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, the mind is a very funny thing, right? The mind plays tricks on us and it makes us seem that we're all kind of very logical and reasonable. And in fact, from a sales leadership perspective, what do? We go and we tell our sales reps, go out there and sell value, like go sell value, sell value. And what they mean when they say sell value is like sell ROI, right? Sell return on investment. If you spend money with me, you're going to have this amazing return. You're going to make more money. You're going to save more money. You'd be an idiot not to spend this with me. And so we go out there and we kind of take a very logical approach to how people buy. This makes total sense, right? But the reality is, like, how people actually buy, they buy based on feelings and emotion almost 100% of the time. And we think in B2B technology, for example, where we have buying committees and like all these things. Now we've kind of stamped that out, but it's actually not the case. And it's so pervasive, not only in B2B technology, but in our normal everyday lives. The clothes we wear, to what we ordered for lunch, to where we go on vacation, it is all 100% driven by feelings, masquerading as logic.
Which is no different than the way we make buying decisions individually as it is anyways, right? So it's sometimes there's the impulse buy, but other times we're going to go and make a buying decision even on something as simple as $9.99. We're looking at the reviews, we're looking at what other people say. We determine places that we're going to go based upon what people have said on travel. What is it? Travelzoo.com or travel. What's that site?
TripAdvisor.
TripAdvisor. That's the one. Yeah. TripAdvisor.
Yeah.
There we go. Not travel. TripAdvisor. Right. So we're making those decisions off of, the hotel was horrible. Oh, I found a roach. Like one person out of like thousands. I say, I found a roach. And then there it is. It's like, that whole buying process is based upon an emotion on other people sometimes as well.
Absolutely. Well, I think you nailed it. Like, think about, you're going to book a vacation and the TripAdvisor place. So first of all, you go into TripAdvisor, you do a search and like a million places show up and you're like, okay, I don't even know which one of these I'm going to pick, but this one got like 4.2 stars and 1,000 reviews. And so what do you do immediately? You start looking at, okay, well, who gave it 1 star and 2 stars? And what did they say? And all of a sudden, these kind of negative reviews kind of tend to overshadow. And then you start looking at but then you start looking at the positive and says, okay, well, Betty from Des Moines, Iowa loved this cruise, but like, I'm not Betty from Des Moines, Iowa. Is she like me? So we're in this kind of constant search for like relevance and kind of emotional connection in everything we buy. And it's so pervasive, even in B2B. I'll give you like this one just simple example. Have you ever heard the phrase, no one ever got fired for buying IBM or like for buying?
Yes, of course.
The market leader?
It was safe.
Well, that's it. Like, I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Does that mean that IBM, no shout out to IBM, no offense to IBM. Does that mean that IBM has the best solution? No, it just means that exactly to your point, it feels safe. I'm not going to get fired. And again, back to value and ROI, those two things are completely different. And so if I, for example, am like, let's say an IT leader at a company, and I had a data breach in my, my network, and now you're trying to sell me, IT security software. In the back of my mind, I'm just thinking, I don't want to get fired. I don't want to get fired. And that's what I value, right? So you're pitching to me ROI, but it's all about the message. No one got fired for buying IBM is a perfect example of the fact that like we are emotional creatures in terms of how we make purchasing decisions.
Do you think though that buyers know how they buy? Do I walk into a buying scenario and say, no, this is the type of buyer that I am?
Absolutely not. Nope. It's completely, for most of us, it's completely unconscious. And like, even think about, you made a purchase. If I were to say like, so, Mario, like, why did you, go on vacation? Your last vacation, you went here. Like, why did you go there versus this other place you could have gone to, which was maybe like a better, value, right? Like, I ask you these questions. They even do this. Like, why did you choose that credit card? Or why did you go with that bank? why did you buy that Tesla? Like, people don't internalize why they do that. And actually, there's a study, I think it was in 2015, it was called The New Science of like Buyer Emotions. And what they found was that people, I talk about this in my book, people buy things generally for like one of 10 macro emotional reasons: safety and security, having a vision of their future self, protecting the environment, these kinds of things. But they don't, when you ask them, why did you make that purchase? They will not tell you those things because they're completely subconscious.
They'll take out their spreadsheet, they'll go through the individual marks and say, yes, they met this requirements because they did this, they could do that, this, and they also made me feel comfortable.
I'll give you this, it's perfect. I'll give you an example. So one of the sales leaders at one of my clients, we went out, I was doing some training for them. And we were in Dallas, and we go for lunch, and he takes out, when we go to the restaurant, 2 cell phones and plunks them down on the table. And I'm like, dude, what's up with the 2 phones? And he said, well, I'm from Dallas, but my company is stationed me in Calgary. So I live in Calgary now, but I kept my Dallas phone number. And it's great because, when I go back to Dallas now, I have my phone there. I don't have to pay roaming fees. And I'm like, okay, just stop. Okay. You're not going to convince me that having 2 cell phones is a better business case than having 1 cell phone, even with all of the, the saving. Just say that you felt attached to your Dallas number and you didn't want to give it up, and not giving it up is worth spending money, right? Like, that's why you did it. Don't give me this whole story. Now, here's the thing. When he's telling me this story, I don't think he's lying. I think he believes he's telling the truth. He has rationalized it in his own head, a business case, which makes absolutely no sense, but it's strictly based on emotion.
Yeah. Very, very good point. Yeah, you get attached to that phone number. That's what I'm attached to my phone number. It's the easiest thing in the world, and I can think of all the different strings and combinations that I've used my phone number with in terms of passwords. Right. So it's like I got my Captain Crunch decoder ring.
There you go. We get it emotionally attached.
Interesting. You mentioned something earlier, and that was the fact that our sellers are definitely getting younger as we bring on, the new generation of sales folks. And that poses its own set of problems with really, younger sellers having a more difficult time potentially converting older, more experienced buyers. And I think there's a challenge there because the way the millennial generation, or even the generation coming after millennials, the way they think is not necessarily the way that a Gen X or a boomer thinks. So what do you think are some of the top challenges that younger sellers have when it comes to selling to older buyer? And when I say older, I'm 43. I put myself in the middle age to older category, right? And I buy very differently than the way someone who else and a millennial would potentially buy. And that's just because of the way I was brought up, the way I think. In fact, it's so funny because when people get my expense reports, I'm the CEO of the company. If I go on travel, I always get the expense report comment. Wait, are you sure? Is this all? Yeah, yes, because I spend your money the way I spend mine. I don't know why. I probably should use my whole per diem rate of $150 a day, but I only use 52. Right. So I did go and I looked for the generic brand or for the off, I don't know why. That's the way I buy, right? That's just me. So what do you think some of the top challenges are that younger sellers have when it comes to working with converting older, more experienced buyers?
It's funny. Back at Salesforce, we used to have this mantra, which is like, spend it like it's yours. Like, we didn't have, there was definitely policy guidelines, but we would always say, like, spend it like it's yours. And I'm with you. I'm 45. And when I started my sales career, I was 25. And and what we sold enterprise workforce management software. That was my first company. Mm-hmm. And so, like, all of a sudden, I'm a sales engineer. And so shout out to all the sales engineers out there. That's how I started my sales career. I'm in the boardroom with these older buyers and these big manufacturing airlines and banks. And they would joke with me, because now it's not like I'm on the phone with them. They see me right there in my little suit and the whole thing. And they'd say, David, we got systems in here that are like older than you, right? Like they're joking with me. And so to me, what I think that the biggest challenge is not so much how people of different generations buy. It's more on the conviction of the seller. I'll give you an example. When I was at Salesforce, I was running small business sales for the Eastern US. And so I had teams in different cities. And so my reps in New York City, shout out to all the New York reps out there, always, like, they hustled the most, made the most calls. And so every now and then I would get one of these younger reps who would make tons and tons of calls, lots of activity, but there'd be no pipeline. I'm like, what's going on? Like, you're making all these calls. And we would start looking at, okay, you're calling the right time of day. Do you not have enough white space in your accounts? What's going on? And they would say, no, we have all these things. And so I said, okay, look, I just have to listen to some of these calls and kind of hear what's going on myself. So I would listen to these calls. And again, these are younger, less experienced reps calling on more senior level decision makers whose job they've never done. Okay. So you're selling to sales, you're selling to VPs of sales. Have you been a VP of sales? No. All right. So you're lacking that kind of, and actually I have a term for it. I call it experience asymmetry. I talk about it in my book. I wrote a Harvard Business Post about a year ago on this topic. I call it experience asymmetry. And so I'm listening to these phone calls from these reps. And imagine you're in this position. You're listening to the calls. I'm just closing my eyes. And I say to myself, I don't really care what the words are. I'm just listening to like the tone. What's the undertone of this call? And I would say, it sounds like you're bothering them. It sounds like you're afraid that you're not adding enough value and you're bothering them. And this is a shout out to all the parents out there. Question for you, Mario. When your kids come to you and they're about to hit you up for something, they want to download an app, they want a snack, they want you to take them somewhere. How long does it take you to tell that they're about to like hit you up for something?
3 seconds.
3 seconds, like super fast, right? Just by the way they approach you. They're like, Dad. And you're like, the answer is no, whatever it is, right?
Exactly.
Start from a position. And that's the way we start very defensive. And in fact, when salespeople go out and they pitch, and this is, often the case when, for example, product marketing gives you like the first call deck or the pitch, and they say, go out and they say this, right? You go out and you kind of say it in this like very mechanical marketing-y way, using words that people don't use when they talk to each other. And customers can tell immediately when they're about to be pitched. So back to like this experience asymmetry, if you don't have that kind of life experience or know what that other person cares or feels, it becomes very difficult, and it manifests in your tone of voice, and your customers can tell. So what's the biggest challenge? It's now look, I can't make you have 20 years experience. You're still going to be the same age you are trying to convert those customers. But the question becomes, how do I infuse you with kind of the passion and conviction that is needed to convert that older, more experienced buyer, because they can hear it in your voice?
Is that something that you can be taught, or is that something that you learn over time?
Well, if it couldn't be taught, then I probably wouldn't have a business. So yes. So yes, you can teach it, but it's more than just, now look, you can acquire that with experience and over the course of time. And look,
Sure.
There's the opposite. Certainly there's people who've been selling for 50 years who don't have that passion and conviction. And part of the challenge is most of the things that we're selling. Now look, if I was calling you up to tell you that you just won $10 million in the lottery, okay, that's a different story. I'm super pumped about that, right? But I'm calling to sell you B2B technology software for your sales team to use to blah, 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 who cares, right? Then I'm become a little bit emotionally encumbered. So one of the ways that you do it is you help create that emotional linkage for your sellers, right? So I'm not saying, oh yeah, hey, it's David calling from Cerebral Selling and we can help increase your revenue by 50% and blah, 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 blah. You lead with feeling, you lead with emotion, and you give your sellers these kind of mental hooks to anchor their feelings on. So
give me an idea what you mean by that, like as an example.
For sure. So one of the simplest tactics I teach in terms of how to connect with modern buyers is picking an enemy, right? So for example, if I want to sell you my training services, I wouldn't say, oh, hey, I'm a sales trainer, blah, blah. I just sound like everyone else. I say, you know what I've learned over the course of 20 years? Like, people love to buy stuff, but you know what they hate to do? Talk to salespeople, right? Men love to dress well, but you know what they hate to do, Mario? What do they hate to do?
I don't know. There's a lot of things I hate to do, but I'm not sure what you're going to ask. I don't know if I should answer that question.
Right. Well, so if you're filling in the gap in the audience there, men love to dress well, but oftentimes they hate to shop. Right. And so like you end up picking these enemies, and the enemy is very emotionally enticing to your buyer. You lead with emotion and belief. So for example, at my third startup, this is the company that was acquired by Salesforce. We were a company that we provided a feedback, coaching, and recognition platform for people at work. So the idea was, as a young person, you want lots of feedback about how you're doing, but people at companies often use these annual performance reviews to give you that feedback. And young people were revolting and saying, well, this is crazy. Like, I got my likes and my feeds and my tweets and all that kind of stuff, and I go to work and I'm getting feedback once a year. That's stupid. So what did we lead with? If we led with this message of, oh, well, we can help you get feedback, coaching, and recognition, that's not going to land very well. So we pivoted to this message of, you know what? People, especially millennials, love feedback, but 80% of them use the word hate to describe performance reviews. And so now I'm not leading with like a sales pitch. I'm leading with something that is very easy for me to articulate, that is very emotionally charged, and will connect on an emotional level with my audience because I'm invoking that enemy. And so if you make it like super easy for a sales rep and anchor it on something that's kind of like these emotional hooks, they're able to go and convert modern buyers with greater frequency and success because they're not reliant on kind of some product marketing, no offense, product marketing narrative, right? It's very tangible, it's very emotional, very easy for them to recount.
So is that though generally hooked to maybe the business pain that you solve? For example, if I were to think about Vengreso, and if I were to approach somebody, it would generally be in the sales line of business. Is who 50% of our deals come from the sales line of business. The other 45% come from marketing, and 10%, 45, and 10. That's the number. And 10% come from sales enablement. So when we generally approach the sales leader, it's primarily structured around the number one pain, which is creating more sales conversations. Most sales leaders are struggling with prospecting, and their teams are not prospecting. So is your emotional pool tied to a pain, or like what's the science behind that how someone can construct that? So or should they just buy the book?
No, look, and here's the little secret, and I'm happy to drop this at the end. I give away everything for free because I'm a solopreneur. The way I grow and scale is I just give everything away for free. So the book you have to pay for online, unfortunately, but the website, YouTube channel, you go nuts. But so here's the thing, and the challenge in a little bit of what we're talking about here is that if you lead with like the pain, so let's say the challenge that the sales leader has is their reps don't want to prospect, okay? And you say, hey, look, we can help you. We work with companies like you all the time where companies are having prospecting challenges. Everyone says that. Like you say that from a position of authority and experience. But like I just got literally a LinkedIn outreach today for someone, I'm not going to mention the name, who said the exact same thing. We can help your company with prospecting. And I look at his profile and he's been in this business for 3 months. And before that, he worked in hospitality, right? And so everyone can just say that. So your message has to be slightly unique and differentiated. So I would take it one step further, which is why does your team have such a hard time prospecting? Like what's the real challenge? Do they not know how to pick up the phone? Are they, do they not know who to call? Like what is the root cause, and focus on something that's slightly more differentiated and doesn't make you sound like everyone else. Because if to a cut, now look, you come with a reputation, which is good. But if I'm just someone who's no one's ever heard of before, which is oftentimes most of us in technology, I need to have a message that is slightly more unique and differentiated.
Generally, I think that most sellers are selling value kind of all wrong, generally speaking. And I think what you're talking about is learning how to sell the value of what it is that you provide. So how do you go about, how do salespeople go about getting the selling value part right, or step away from it being all wrong?
Right. Well, here's a simple exercise that I often do with my clients, which is think about who your ideal customer is. Okay. A lot of people do this. Okay. Who's your ideal customer? What's the persona? What do they look like? How much years of experience they have? Like, who is this person? And then the second thing is I want you to think about what does this person value, keeping in mind that what they value and the business benefit they get from your solution are two completely different things, right? So, for example, if all of a sudden, I remember at a certain point in our travel history, some idiot brought a liquid and gel onto an airplane and tried to do something nefarious with it. So all of a sudden now, all of the airports around America have to go out and buy liquid and gel detectors for airports, okay? So what do you think the person who needs to buy liquid and gel detectors now values, right? They don't necessarily, they're not looking for the ROI. They have a mandate to keep America safe, right? And so, and even now you're seeing now, and depending on when this airs, we're kind of still in the pandemic phase now. I wonder, all of the hospitals and municipalities and so on that are buying PPE, masks and gloves and gowns and stuff like that, are they looking at the ROI of those things, right? Or do they just value getting that stuff into the hands of medical practitioners, frontline workers as soon as possible, right? So the exercise of who's your ideal customer and what do they value is really important, because that's going to inform the message you go out with. So I'll give you an example from one of my clients who does, they're in like IT security, and they sell to MSPs, so managed service providers. Yep. So these MSPs, one of the things they need to do is they need to kind of, monitor their clients' network infrastructure and make sure there's no intrusions or data breaches and all that kind of stuff. And so they could go out with this message of just saying, oh yeah, like we help you and we can help you restore and recover and like do all these things. But instead they go out with a more emotionally charged message. And they say, if you're an MSP and your customer has a problem with their network, you need to find that problem before they do and call you in the middle of the night, right? So if I'm, and again, what does that person value? Sure, there's an ROI to buying my software, but what they value is not getting that angry customer call in the middle of the night for something that they should have found, right? And that might be something, when you ask those IT professionals, what is it you care about? They will not tell you that, right? And they won't tell you that because it's sensitive. It's like me going to the gym and the trainer says, what are you there for? And I'm there because my wife doesn't find me desirable anymore. This is a fictitious story, by the way.
Sure, David.
And so when the trainer asks me why I'm there, I'm not telling him or her that, right? But that's really why I'm there. I'm going to make up some other bullshit story, right? So like really getting into the mind of your customer and thinking about what it is. I refer to this in the book as the unknown and unspoken, like the things that they're not thinking about or telling you. You need to bring that to them. And that's what's going to help you your message resonate with them on that more emotional level. Think about what it is they value and bringing that to them.
So what you're saying then is that we shouldn't be selling to solutions. We should be selling to problems.
Problems. Yes. Fall in love with the problem, because your solution will also change over time. Fall in love with the problem, because that's what your customers are thinking about.
By the way, my wife does not find me desirable anymore because I've gained 30 pounds.
So me and you are going to hit the gym after this is all over.
I'm just going to eat more ice cream. I'm like, no, baby, you're all right. Don't worry about it. I'm just kidding. That's actually a good one, though. I haven't actually had someone tell me that, but that's true, though, the way you just articulated. I'm in the gym. Why are you here for? Oh, I want to get exercise. I want to be better fit, be healthier. Okay. Really? To your point, no, your wife says, you're fatty.
Well, look for you now. So you're selling training solutions, right?
Sure.
And so the question is, what's the ROI? Like when you sell what you sell, why are people buying you? And it could be because they're looking at their sales funnel and they're thinking to themselves, you know what? I have a prospecting problem. The conversion rate is low at the top of the funnel. I need some tactics and infusion of knowledge to help with that. Or here's a completely other opposite direction. You've never invested in sales training before. Your team is young and less experienced, and you feel that if you don't invest in sales training now, they're all going to quit and walk out the door because they don't feel that you are committed to their professional development. Mm-hmm. Okay. Those are two equally good reasons why you should invest and why customers might come to you. And the question is, your job is to figure out, why the customer is there, but sometimes priming them and leading with some of these messages. Hey, look, think about if you go to the gym and you're there because your wife doesn't find you desirable anymore. What would it take? What would the trainer have to say? And this is a good example for all you sellers out there. Your customers have these hidden pains that they're not bringing you. I want you to think about what you would have to say and ask to get that customer to feel comfortable revealing that is a kind of a secret pain and challenge for them. What would you have to say? What would it take?
Valid point. I like that. It's a very, very good assessment there in terms of really focusing on selling to the problem. Is it in the book? I think you talk about this, about messaging pitch tactics. Is that high impact messaging and pitch tactic? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, again, back to this concept of like falling in love with the problem. So in the chapter, I talk about things like finding the enemy and how to craft like a narrative, because people are emotionally conditioned to respond to stories. Like we just get hooked. But pitches, we immediately tune out to. But even something very simple like data, okay, and how you use data. So let's say I'll give you an example. Let's say, for example, that by deploying your solution, whatever it is you're selling, you're going to save me some time. Okay, you're going to automate something, you're going to save me some time. So how do you describe the value of that solution? Are you telling me, for example, you could say, hey, look, you deploy our solution, Mario, and you will save 10% of your time every week. Okay, 10% of your time, you're just going to get that back. Or I could say, you deploy our solution, you're going to get 20 hours a week of your time back. Now, those two things might be mathematically equivalent, right? But they are not processed. I say processed because I'm Canadian, processed in the same way in your mind. One is more tangible and relatable than the other. And you see this as well in, the statistics being reported in pandemics, and you see this everywhere. The way you present data has a huge impact on how it gets assimilated by your customer.
Repeat that example one more time. I want to absorb that.
Yeah. So I might say, I'll mathematically equivalent numbers.
Yeah.
One expressed as a percentage, one expressed as an absolute. So for example, I might say, hey, look, Mario, you even let's say with revenue, you hire me for sales training, you're going to see a 5% increase in your revenue, right? You hire me for sales training, you're going to see a $20 million increase in your revenue, right? Or your share price, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
One is a percentage, one is an absolute number. Now, again, they're assimilated very differently. Even let's say, talk about pandemic for a second. A country had an outbreak of 4,500 cases of COVID-19, right? The same country had an outbreak that infected 0.001% of their population. Different, same, let's just say for, I don't know which country this is, mathematically equivalent, processed very differently in the brain.
The percentage is like, not that big of a deal, but 4,500 people, wow.
Now look, it could go the reverse. I'll give you a personal example. So I actually talk about this a little bit in the book, in the concept of discovery. So I had cancer a number of years ago. I'm okay now, thank goodness. But I remember when I was going through my cancer treatment, one of the treatment options came with it. They said, if you do this, and they were recommending that I do it, it's going to double your chances of getting like a secondary cancer.
Oh, wow.
I was like, shit, that's not good, right?
Now, wait, why do you want me to do this?
So I'm just like reading this. And now they didn't tell this to me. I'm just kind of reading this in kind of the literature. And I go to my doctor. I'm like, why would I do this? It's like, it's doubling my chances, right? And he said, no, he's like, don't worry about it. He's like, your chances right now are 1 in a million. So now your chances after this are 2 in a million, right? So think about that, right? He's saying that your chances are doubled, but the absolute, so it's, it's 100% increase, but the actual chances, when I look at the absolute number, is actually quite small. So he's like, don't worry, it's nothing. No one actually gets this. Is just academics, reporting statistics kind of a thing. So the way you think about numbers and how you present your business case can have a huge impact on how your customers assimilate it.
Interesting. So that boils down to product marketing messaging or marketing-based messaging that gets to the salespeople. So generally, if I rewind back into the process.
Right on. There you go. You can come to our country now.
Yeah, I've come to be a Canadian. The process, if I rewind the process back to where does it all stem from, I would generally argue that the problem doesn't stem in sales. The problem doesn't stem from marketing. The problem doesn't stem from product marketing. The problem stems from somebody probably in engineering and research that is now working down this path, and everybody takes it and they start running with it all the way down to the bottom.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things people ask me is they say, why do people do this? Like, why do people sell ROI versus value? Why do people use tactics that wouldn't work on them? Why do they do this? Like the same thing as what you're saying here. Like, why would this game of broken telephone result in someone taking this piece of content and just going out and running with it? And I actually hit this in the very first word and chapter of the book. I call it the Cobra Kai Paradox.
Cobra Kai, and back from our days of what, Karate Kid.
That's right. So 1984, we're both kids, and I say the Karate Kid. I love the Karate Kid growing up. It was maybe why I ended up going
wax off, Daniel-san.
Right. So it's part of our culture, and I call it the Cobra Kai Paradox because of in martial arts, there's no university, there's no degree. Like there's all sorts of martial arts, and basically what you do is you learn from your sensei. And you grow up to be the practitioner that your sensei teaches you to become. And I say, like in the Karate Kid, you have these kids who learn from a sensei who basically taught them to be like an asshole. Can I say asshole on your show here?
Technically not, but you've already got thrown a couple bombs out. So
so they teach them how to do martial arts and karate in this like underhanded, no mercy, aggressive way.
Right.
And that's because they learn from their sensei and they just grow up and they do that. Versus the Mr. Miyagi, you grow up and now you're calm and you're it's all about defense, and it's a totally different philosophy. And you see these sellers and even sales trainers. There's so many different sales trainers that teach so many different philosophies because there's no university degree you need to do this. Right. And so why do people do this? It's because they just learn from their sensei who learned from their sensei before them. And that's how we ended up in this predicament. But we don't often stop and say, well, what's changed? Right? Like maybe we shouldn't be doing this stuff anymore.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a very valid point. I think, though, that all the things that you're talking about are STEM, transcend, go all the way down on what's the word I'm looking for? It goes all the way down. What's that?
Originate?
Not originate. No. I'm actually trying to. The end result is salespeople are getting it wrong when it comes to generally how they're selling, whether That's, selling value versus ROI, selling to the problems or not selling to the problems. And then it also relates to handling objections, customer objections. And it's because of all this information that they're getting from the back, right? This is what you need to say. This is what our product marketing pitch is. This is all the materials behind that, blah, 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 right? ROI, value, here are all the clients that got all this stuff, right? But they oftentimes forget. It's like, if I were to line up 100 salespeople, this is probably something I should do. Probably be a great live broadcast. 100 salespeople and say, tell me who you help and how you help and what business problem you solve. Go. 2 sentences. I would probably guess that maybe 1, max 2 would be able to actually articulate that. And it goes all the way down to with the inability to be able to articulate that, then you start handling customer objections pretty much all wrong for the most part. Talk a little bit about how salespeople should handle customer objections or how they're getting it wrong right now. And I think you've got some science behind that as well.
Yeah, well, so there's some good science, there's some good data. I think one of the biggest disservices that sales teams often do when they're creating their objection handling playbook, let's call it, is they come up with 2 columns, right? Column A, objection, column B, the handle, right? They say this, you say that. And the reality is, like, that's not a very human way of going out and handling anything, right? Objection discussions are narratives. It's a back and forth. I kind of call it it's like sparring. It's not like you punch me and I block and then boom, right? It goes away. Think about this example of it's too expensive. Like that's let's say it's the most common objection salespeople get. It's too expensive, right? I want you to do this exercise. Say it's too expensive and then fill in the blank of just like, what is the rest of that sentence? And see how many permutations you can come up with, right? And now I want you to think about like, what is the hidden meaning behind all of those objections? Even something simple like, for example, if I ask someone out on a date and they don't want to go out with me, what do they say? They could say a million different things. And I don't know. So let's say I ask you on a date, Mario, and I say, hey, Mario, you want to go on a date on Saturday night? And you say, oh, I'm busy on Saturday night. How do I know what the reason is, right? How would you handle that? If you asked me on a date and you say, David, you want to go on a date? And I'm like, oh, I'm busy Saturday night. What would you do?
I'd say game on. Game on, baby. I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. I'm going to get that kiss.
What's the next step? How would you approach that? What would you say?
What would I say? For me personally, I'd say, okay, no problem. Is there another Saturday? Is there another evening that might work?
Okay, there you go. So now there's no objection handle for, oh, I'm busy Saturday night. There's no column B. You come back to me with a question.
Right.
And now you're testing me. And now if I say, well, actually, yeah, in a few weeks I am free, then you know that it was more of a logistical, tactical objection. If I say, I'm kind of busy for the next few months, now all of a sudden you start like, okay, now you're getting the hint that like, maybe I don't ever want to go out with you, right?
Yeah.
So that's the same thing with objection handling. There's no column A, column B. It's a narrative. And the data and the science tells us that the best sales reps are the ones that respond to objections with questions the majority of the time to help understand the intent and the underlying, the root cause so that they can address it.
So David, are you going to go out with me?
I don't know. Where are we going to go?
That's the key, right? Yeah. What car are you going to pick me up in and where are we going to go?
That's
How much will you spend on me?
Can I order whatever I want? I don't know.
Exactly. How many drinks?
So. Yeah. Right? But now we're qualifying each other.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. You're like, are you qualified to go out with me? I love it. Well, listen, you've got the book. The book's called Sell the Way You Buy. And if people are interested, I think they can go to sellthewayyoubuy.com. Is that right?
They can, yeah. Sellthewayyoubuy.com will take you to a page with info about the book, but you can also find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, hopefully in a store if you're in the going out to the store mood now, you're allowed to. You can get it there too.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we put that into the show notes so you guys have access to it in the show notes of this particular page. David, if someone wants to connect with you, is it through Twitter, LinkedIn, email? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, look, you can always hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always up for connecting with folks. And then, of course, you can find me on my website, cerebralselling.com, and you can contact me through there. But yeah, LinkedIn is kind of like the primary network for us, B2B sellers, but I'm also on Twitter and Instagram and the whole thing too. And
we'll make sure to put all that into the show notes. But make sure when you reach out to David Priemer, and it's spelled Priemer, make sure you say, hey, I heard you on the Modern Selling podcast. So he knows exactly where you came from. And David, before you leave, I got one question for you. And that is, your all-time favorite movie. What is it?
So I'm gonna maybe punt a little on this. I'm not good with favorite things. My kids tease me all the time. They're like, Dad, you're so hard to buy for. You don't have a favorite song, color, movie, whatever. But if I were to answer the question in terms of what's my favorite sales movie,
Or just movie in general. Just movie in general. Could be a sales movie, but movie in general.
Oh man, this is one of those things I'll probably think about after the fact. Oh, I should have said this, but
it's not a trick question, bro.
Not a trick question. My favorite sales movie, which I'll is top of mind for now, is Tommy Boy. People often think about The Wolf of Wall Street, this, that, the other thing. I love Tommy Boy because it tells a story of a guy who has this innate ability to connect with people. He just doesn't realize it, but then he learns it over the course of the movie. And I think that's quite honestly all of us. He just kind of learns to rely on the things that make us human.
So I was asked I forget why I was asked this question. Salesforce produced a movie called The Story of Sales. Yes. And I was one of the 20 sales influencers they asked to be part of that particular film, which I was very thankful and honored to be part of it. And someone asked me on an interview, what's your favorite movie? And I said, my favorite movie, honestly, till the very day, you'll laugh at this, but you will know exactly what I'm talking about. It was and is The Goonies.
Yeah.
The Goonies. It was a story of not only, trying to find a solution and an adventure to be able to solve a problem, but it was a story of we can do something grandiose and big and save the world. And so Goonies, my kids haven't watched it yet because both of them they run a little bit more on the fearful side of certain movies. But when they are able to watch it, they will love it, hopefully, just like the way I did.
That's awesome.
So, David, I loved having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining here on the Modern Selling Podcast. And for all of you listening in right now, make sure you go out and take a look at David's book. And the title of that book is Sell the Way You Buy. And you can find it on sellthewayyoubuy.com. Look at my boy, David Priemer, and make sure you connect with him. And for all of you still listening in right now, do not turn that dial. Listen to this very important message right now. Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a rating and review on iTunes. I would appreciate it. Also, if you want to easily find our show, just go to themodernsellingpodcast.com. Hey, since you'll be on our site, be sure to check out our Modern Marketing Engine podcast hosted by my co-founder and CMO, Bernie Borges. Thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.